Hello and welcome back to Writing Women, the show where I talk about the women who exist in fiction and the people who created them. This week we're going to go back into the Circle of Magic quartet with the second book in the series, Triss's Book. And don't worry, I have my embroidery again. I've got this weird light and it's so wild because I've got so many color options to choose from and I can't tell which one I like. I don't know. No. Still no. Maybe. Nah. Close? That's acceptable. All right. This will be the second time of me embroidering the whole time for the camera. So we will see how this goes. Maybe I'll be a little bit more practiced at it this time and it won't take me so many cuts to get out what I need to say. And also, maybe by the time I'm done with the Circle books, I'll be actually done with this thing. This book was published in 1998 and like the first one, it follows all four mains at the same time. Now here is where the story is going to pick up into much more of a kind of action-packed story versus the slower narrative of the first one. There's going to be new types of spells, there's magical battles, there's pirates, there's all sorts of new stuff, and I'm really excited to get into it. Now, if you haven't watched my first video in this series, I recommend doing so because I do not plan on repeating everyone's full names, titles, powers, etc. in the summary. You can find that video along with all of my other Tamara Pierce related content in the Tamara Pierce playlist. With that said, let's get into the summary. We start only 10 days after the major earthquake at the end of the last book. The summer heat keeps Triss awake, and so she slips out of Discipline Cottage and takes a walk along the wall to try and catch a cool summer breeze. Her friends join her on the walk, and that same breeze carries snatches of conversations to all of them. They realize that they can all hear it instead of just Triss, and they start to figure out that the spinning of their powers during the quake has had some weird side effects on their abilities. Sometime after this magically overheard conversation, some watchtowers in the harbor are destroyed by explosions. The following morning, Nico brings Triss to one of the ruined towers to try and figure out what happened. He borrows some power from Triss so that he can cast a spell that will allow him to see the events leading up to the explosion. He also magics our girl's glasses so that she can begin to see spells that are laid around her. Now she can physically see all of the spells that were laid in the tower's foundation that should have protected it from the explosions. Before leaving, Triss finds a baby bird whose parents were killed in the blast, and she decides to take it in, because of course she does. It's a Tamara Pierce book. It wouldn't be unless we were adding animals in every single new installment. Nico goes on to the other tower to see what happened there, and Triss returns to Discipline Cottage to ask Rosethorn for help with the baby bird, because Rosethorn has experience raising nestlings. Rosethorn identifies it as a starling and sends Briar off to the hub to get some feed for it. While there, he notices the scent of cinnamon and poppy, which can be used in magic for invisibility spells. He writes it off as some apprentice testing out a new spell and just returns to Discipline Cottage. The reason he writes it off as a student rather than a practiced mage is because he can dimly see the outline of the person underneath the spell, which you shouldn't be able to do if it's a properly laid invisibility spell. Meanwhile, Sandry and Lark have been making bandages at a rapid rate because the temple's supply is dangerously low. The smith Frostpine and his two students, Daja and Kirel, are out mending the ancient spell net that surrounds Winding Circle Temple because it took a lot of damage during the earthquake. Frostpine correctly assumes that someone might try and take advantage of Winding Circle while it's still trying to recover from the quake. Daja keeps seeing a ship at the edge of her vision, but every time she tries to look straight at it, she can't see it anymore. She convinces herself that it's a mirage, and eventually Kirel asks her what's wrong because she keeps jumping. She tells him what she sees, and he calls Frostpine to her. Frostpine tells Daja to reach out with her magic toward the ship. If she can sense it out there, because it would obviously have metal all over it if it were a real ship, then they know it's real. If she doesn't sense anything out there, then she knows it's just her mind playing tricks on her. So she does, and of course, it's real. Frostpine kind of hustles his students through their work because he knows that no ship that's taking that great of pains to not be seen is there for a good reason. That evening, Amory Glassfire comes to Discipline Cottage on the pretext of delivering a letter to Nico. Triss recognizes Amory as her cousin, and once they talk a little bit in private, Amory brings up her parents. He tells her that they are ill and that she should probably go home to see them as soon as possible or they might die. Triss refuses. She starts to lose her temper a little bit, and winds start to whip around the room. She reminds her cousin how she was disowned by her parents, in fact by their whole family. A runner for Nico arrives because suddenly all of the scrying devices at Winding Circle have shattered, which leaves Winding Circle Temple blind to the future. Very early the next morning, Triss is again walking along the wall around Winding Circle. She sees that there is a huge magic box disguised as a storm coming toward the temple over the water. Frostpine calls it discipline and wakes Daja. He tells her that they have a dangerous but important task and insists that she does not have to help him unless she wants to. She of course agrees, and with a squad of guards, they sail out to the harbor entrance. There are 2 chains across the harbor entrance that prevent unwanted visitors from passing. The 2 smith mages are needed to make sure that none of the links in the chain have weakened over time, so they have to search it link by link. Before they can finish, the storm vanishes and it reveals a large fleet of pirate ships. 2 catapult stones fly from the fleet and hit 2 more of the watchtowers. One of them misses and hits one of the Duke's ships, which was hidden just inside the harbor wall. Where the stone hits, the ship explodes. It tears the vessel and anyone nearby to pieces. After this, Frostpine decides that the work needs to go faster, so he creates a powerful spell weaving and draws on Daja's power to complete it. Meanwhile, at Discipline, the other 3 see what Daja can see through their lumpy thread bond. They even feel Daja's pain when she is hit by a piece of wood. Daja and Frostpine are brought back to Discipline Cottage, laid over the backs of their mounts, completely spent of magical energy. They are cared for by the others and given some fortifying drinks by Rosethorn. The pirate fleet now sits in the water without its invisibility spells, openly showing itself to Winding Circle. Meanwhile, the temple community starts working its own defensive spells. The mages call a heavy fog, which will make it harder for the pirates to navigate and see, and also most of the magical spell network is activated. The northern part of the spell net is left inactive because they're taking in villagers for safety, and a group of them is still expected to come through. Amory asks for and gets permission to stay at Discipline because the dormitories are too full. The whole day, the adults are busy with getting the defenses up at the temple. Rosethorn and Briar try to strengthen protections at the south wall by making a giant magically assisted wall of thorny plants to try and stop the pirates that way. When the pirates try to get through this green wall and hurt Rosethorn, the plants retaliate. Briar and the girls try to help by joining their strength again and feeding it into the magic. Nico is furious with them for doing so because they were meddling with Rosethorn's spell working and it could have ended in disaster. They shouldn't have been able to enter her spell at all. As punishment, he takes the lumpy thread away from Sandry until they can figure everything out. While the others are still out at the Earth Temple baths that evening, Briar goes through Amory's possessions. Many years as a thief taught him the trademarks to look for to spot a student, and basically a mark who wasn't worth your time, and Amory's seemingly rich lifestyle didn't sit well with him. What he finds is the only remaining intact scrying mirror in the entire temple complex, and also the scented oils that Amory used in his invisibility spell that day in the hub. He tells Triss immediately what he found, but she tries not to believe him. It seems like she does deep down know that he's telling her the truth, but she tries to find ways to justify why Amory would have all of these things, because she doesn't really want to believe that the only person in her family who's ever been nice to her would betray everyone else that she loved like that. Sadly, she gets proof when Amory sneaks out in the middle of the night to open up the north gate for the pirates. He had put a sleeping potion in the food at the hub to guarantee that none of the dedicates would recognize his actions for what they were until it was too late. That, of course, was the purpose of his secret trip to the hub kitchens. Triss and Briar follow him because they had only eaten food that had been left at the cottage, not anything directly from the hub. They confront Amory and find out that he has been working for the pirate mage Enahar. Enahar has linked Amory to him through an earring that he always wears. Triss tries to talk to Amory, but he gut punches her and knocks her down. Briar tries to go for him but misses. The pirates blast open the gate and immediately kill Amory. Triss doesn't see at first that they've killed him, but she is furious. She accidentally calls a violent hailstorm, which wakes up the other dedicates around them and also distracts the pirates long enough for the dedicates to come to their rescue. They fight off the small band of pirates and Triss sees her cousin's body. She takes the magical earring, the symbol of his connection to Enahar. The next morning, the children are left alone at discipline because everyone else is busy. Together, they discover that Triss's lightning can actually destroy the boomstones in mid-air before they can do any damage on the ground. They practice on this for a while before the adults return. The 4 children are sent away upstairs while the adults gather and try to figure out what they're going to do next. Triss uses her power to bring a breeze past the adults and up into the room so that they can eavesdrop on the conversation. They find out that the adults are planning on sending them out of harm's way to Summersea. None of them are really a fan of this idea because they're afraid that they'll leave Winding Circle and in their absence it'll be smashed to bits. Triss tries to leave, thinking that she can just destroy the pirate fleet herself, but the others stop her. They want to form a little bit more of a plan before they go running off. Triss agrees and they stop sitting on her and let her go. So she says she needs to use the privy and they let her leave the room. Of course, she runs off and they give chase. On the wall, Triss is thinking about how she's going to destroy the entire pirate fleet rather than be sent away from the one place she has ever considered home. The other 3 join with her, and Sandry weaves a magical barrier, keeping all of the dedicates that are on the wall away from them so they can't be distracted from their work. They aren't sure if they'll be able to rejoin again fully without Lumpy Thread, but Sandry makes a quick weave and binds them together again pretty strongly. Daja calls the metal out of the ships, the nails, the weapons, everything, and dumps it into the water. Briar, of course, calls plants to help. Seaweed rises up from the bottom, and also he revitalizes the wall that he and Rosethorn had built earlier. Triss calls a gigantic waterspout again and is like Zeus, just throwing lightning bolts everywhere. She destroys the flagship herself, but sees that Amory's earring is still glowing, so she knows that the mage Enahar was not on the ship. Sandry notices a weird magical pattern laid over the pirate fleet. She and Triss follow the thread from Amory's earring through the pattern all the way to a small, unobtrusive ship in the back. Triss flies off to destroy that ship, but one by one her siblings are caught in the magical net and drawn toward Enahar. He uses his pattern to drain their power from them. He stops Triss by showing her that he will destroy her friends if she tries to destroy him. She despairs momentarily, but feels something pressed into the hand of her physical body. Nico has returned Lumpy Thread. He presses Triss's lump into her hand. The teachers all arrive to support their individual students now that Sandry's barrier has failed along with her failing magic. The presence of their physical bond and the support of their teachers allows them to break free of the trap Enahar had set for them. Triss calls a mighty lightning bolt and smashes Enahar's ship to pieces. His magical self tries to pull her down with him because she is still clinging to Amory's earring. Her friends take the earring from her physical body and use some of the lightning that crawls across her skin to destroy it. Triss is freed from Enahar's grasp, but her magical self is too weak to fly back to her body, so she just kind of drifts on the tide for a while until Lark gently brings her back into her own body. Because she killed so many people with her powers, Triss decides to help out in the temple's infirmaries despite the thankless nature of the task. Nico asks her what she wants to study next, and she said that she really needs to learn control because she never wants to hurt people again the way she did this time. The first thing that I want to bring up is a really common criticism that I see of Sandry's book, but it kind of feeds into Triss's book a little bit. I've heard a lot of people say that Sandry's book, not that it's boring exactly, but that not a lot happens in it. And I just need to thoroughly disagree with that. And Triss's book is where the story really starts to pick up because it gets more actiony. But I feel like the storytelling in Sandry's book is exactly perfect for who Sandry is as a character and her type of power. It's not flashy, it's not action-packed, it's very subtle. For Sandry's big act, there isn't anything huge like tossing lightning bolts and destroying ships. I mean, it's kind of like the climax of doing anything involving working with thread. It's not going to be flashy or amazing. It's not going to wow anybody. It's just going to be a nice, beautiful, sturdy final result. That's all I really wanted to say about it. It's not a huge thing. It's just something that always kind of bugs me a little bit. I just don't like people kind of writing off Sandry's book as boring or not really worth reading in a reread, because there is so much in that book and it sets the stage so well for everything else that happens in the series as a whole. Triss has a really complicated relationship with everyone in the house, especially the adults. I like that her fear of Rosethorn isn't based entirely on Rosethorn's prickly personality. It also ties into her traumatic history of adults behaving cruelly toward her. Rosethorn frequently seems upset, and in Triss's experience, adults who are upset with her send her away. The encounter with Rosethorn about the starling, though, leads to one of my favorite quotes from Rosethorn in this entire series. Everyone seems to love the thing that their magic gives them an affinity with, and Triss is a little confused when she sees how much Rosethorn knows about and loves taking care of birds when she doesn't have any magic with animals. But Rosethorn clarifies to her that you don't have to have magic with something to love it. That sentiment is so important to me as someone who really loves to paint and draw, but not to the extent that I would get enough practice at it, that I would start to get a more magical final result, if you know what I mean. While I'm on the subject of teachers, I want to talk about Frostpine and Daja. Rather than the color of their skin being kind of a background thing about their character, just a little check in the diversity box, it's actually a thing that the characters talk about. Even just in passing as a joke about where they each are from and how they deal with the heat. I like that Daja isn't the only person in the cast who is black and also has a very large presence in the story. Frostpine also fully believes Daja when she tells him what she sees. There's a constant thread in Tammy's books of adults validating the concerns of children by just believing them. Even if it's something that seems ridiculous, like an invisible ship. He believes that she sees it, and he helps her figure out if it's there or not. If it's real, then she was correct. And he didn't waste time hurting her by denying what she told him. And if it wasn't, then she could be sure it was just her imagination, but without the added stress of a respected adult not trusting her. Frostpine also does not force Daja to help him in the harbor. He gives her all of the information and tells her that he would like her help, but that it is her choice. He will not force her because she is her own person and not his property. Frostpine definitely feels kind of like a father figure for Daja, in much the same way that the four children are starting to feel like siblings. I think it's a really great thing for kids to see a representation of found family. I think it's really important to show a bond that formed between friends, foster parents, foster siblings, and how it can sometimes be more important to someone than that of their biological family. Not every kid has a traditional home life, and when I was the age group that these books were aimed at, there wasn't much media around that was directed at kids who felt closer to their friends than their family. Or hell, I don't even remember any story from when I was a kid about kids who were in a foster home that wasn't about how troubled and sad they were. Back to Triss. Triss has PTSD. and her response to her trauma is explosive anger. That is something that she and I share. As a teen reading this, I really didn't identify with Triss. I was in fact kind of annoyed by her being angry all the time, because at that point I hadn't experienced the events that would lead to the extent of the trauma I now have. On this side of that part of my life, though, Triss calls to me in a way that very few characters in books ever do. She has to make a physical effort to not lash out at people when the anger is on her. It comes up fast and it fades very slowly. She constantly reminds herself of every event in her past that led up to her current feeling of worthlessness. Her learning to control her power can be read very clearly, I think, as her working through PTSD and learning to work through her trauma and deal with it in a healthier way. Triss was also the first character I really remember reading about who was explicitly a little chubby. She's teased for it, and she seems to hate the fact that she gets teased, but not really the fact that she's a little over what everyone considers to be a normal weight. Now, I want to bring up something about Winding Circle in general. The economy of the temple makes sense in a way that it technically doesn't have to in a book that's aimed at children. It explains how the temple grows its food, how it gets its wool, how it makes money to pay for the things that it can't make itself. Compare that to other big magical schools like, say, Hogwarts. In that series, the reader is kind of assumed to have grown up a little bit with the series, but the way the school is run, how everything is paid for, how everything happens, is never really explained. Or if it is, it's just generally kind of hand-waved with magic. Knowing that your young readers might be inquisitive enough to think about and ask the question, how can they get all of this food? And knowing that they will understand the basics of the answer, and then also giving them that answer without info dumping and completely breaking the flow of the story, is something that very few children's authors, young adult authors, etc., even attempt, never mind doing it so successfully as we see here. That is it for Triss's book, y'all. I am so much further in this thing than I was when I started recording. I'm in these little fiddly bits trying to fill in some space, and I hate filling in space. It takes me so long, and I'm very bad at it. I've been working at this for so long, you just can't tell because I've cut all of the times that I stopped and went, or yelled at my dog. I am so pumped about this series. I am having such a hard time threading this needle. All right, you know what? I'm just going to give up. I'm going to stop with that for now. Every sentence I read just gets me so emotional. I'm going to be driving up to Syracuse this weekend, and I'm going to be listening to Daja's book the whole way, and I'm so excited for it. Daja is my girl, and I cannot wait. Story time. When I first found a Tamara Pierce book, it was Cold Fire. I think I've mentioned this before in an episode, but I found Cold Fire on a bookshelf and I thought the cover looked really cool. So I picked it up, read it, was extremely confused. I was like, what is this? Her arm, it's metal? I don't get it. She has powers. What's this about a circle? I don't get it. And then I very painstakingly accumulated all of Tamara Pierce's books over years. And finally, I have almost all of them. Some of them went missing in the many times I've had to move since then. But I'm so pumped. Daja was my first, my original. And I can't wait. Thanks for watching this far. If you like this video, please don't forget to actually like the video. And if you would like to keep me in embroidery materials, go on and head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/writingwomen because the big bad YouTube algorithm has not, unfortunately, brought me fame and fortune yet. You can subscribe for as little as $2 a month and get access to rewards like early access to videos, some behind the scenes stuff, voting abilities on upcoming projects, and input on where I'd like to take the channel. Thanks to my current patrons, Mariodoc Brandybuck, Ms. Psycho, Amy Chu, aka The Doctor, Lord Butterbutt, and Bruce. See you next time!